Welcome, lovely students, to another recording of the information that you need for research practices merging into research project. So today we're going to talk about writing effective questions, and this is in relation to your first assignment. So when you're creating a research instrument, so whether that be a survey, an interview, it could be when you're questioning a focus group. It could be any kind of anything where you're going to actually ask some questions. So this is quite brief, but I do really need everyone to know this information because it is important when you're starting to gather the necessary answers that you need to help answer your research project question. Okay, so where to begin? Um, what we're going to talk about today is basically I'm needing you to start thinking when you're thinking about your designing your questions, it needs to be backwards by design. So I'm going to talk about surveys and interviews because they're going to be the main ones. But what you need to really be asking yourself is what information do you want and need in able to answer your research project questions? Now, I put questions there, so that is plural on purpose because a lot of you will who go to write in an essay format in particular will actually develop up to 3 sub questions to help you answer your overall question. It makes it very easy when you're developing, when you're starting to think about and research and how much you need to include and what you need to cut out. So that is why that's there. So what information do you need to answer your research project question? And the other thing is what is useful. So going on the back of the qualitative and quantitative data information that you should have now already been through, what we're looking at here is when you're asking questions, what kind of data do you want to collect? So first and foremost, so after you're thinking about what questions, you then need to start going, okay, so would it be useful for me to include things like age or gender or, maybe it might be useful to know their occupation, or maybe it might be that you want them to identify a specific thing about themselves. By doing these, and this is like a yes, almost like a yes no kind of questions, or like multiple choice. By adding those in, that's where you're gonna kind of get those where you are going to get those uh, quantitative um, types of data from. So you can say that like 43% of your respondents were identified as female, 10% identified as other, or maybe if you're looking at the LGBTQI plus community, you could say you could add in all those different identities if you wanted, and then you can kind of get a rough idea of who's actually responding to the surveys. So there's all these different things that you need to think about. Um, so when you're talking about qualitative data, um, it's you're talking about anecdotal, which simply means personal recounts as evidence, and or the percentages. It is strongly recommended that you do include both. Just so when you're writing, you can say that, based on the figures that I was able to obtain through my personal research, um, I found that, 30% of respondents who identified as, maybe Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders found that the education system was failing them, so you've got to think of those kind of things when you're writing this. So step 2, once you know the information that will be useful, and again, useful being that it can respond to your questions, so they answer your questions, you then need to be thinking, and then you're starting to think about the answers you want. So you know that, okay, so I know that to answer my question, I need to know what this person or these people think about this particular topic. So I said think. If I'm saying that they think something, it automatically assumes that I want qualitative. So I want, going back a slide, I want this anecdotal evidence because I want personal recounts. And this actually is really useful if you're going to use direct quotes or you can summarize quotes. And again, going back to another lesson we talked about where we looked at the different types of research methods with the online gathering of data, you can for a lot of those, you can automatically generate some graphs and stuff as well. Again, super, super useful in your assignments. And stuff that that you can continue to go back to as evidence going, see, I've collected this and I've collected this. What does that mean? So you want a combination, you want to be thinking about how these people, or however you're going to carry it out, how will it help? How can they add value? And this is specific, how can they add value in their answers? The way you get people to add value is that you actually construct good questions. And I am, please, please, please get these drafted. It is really important that you get these drafted because there are things. So I've had experiences where people just really didn't understand the questions because they picked a target audience, and then they went, okay, I want to ask these questions to these people. But what happened is the way they wrote the questions was far, far, far too high. So it was too academic and too obscure for the people who they wanted to get the answers from, for them to actually comprehend. So we need to be really, really careful when we're doing this. So they don't need to be particularly difficult questions. You just need to think about, so you're thinking about things that you the information you want to get from people. You want information that's useful. You want information that's relevant to your question. And you also want to make sure that whoever you're catering these questions to can understand them. So these are your key things to think about. Um, this is where knowing your topic and then trying to find someone to answer these questions for you is really beneficial. So those of you who are delving quite deep and looking at quite academic sides of things, so I know there's a few of you who are really delving into the science, I strongly recommend that if this is a genuine interest for you, that I think we should try and find a university lecturer or a PhD student who might be willing to answer some questions. I can help you with this, but I would like you to make yourself known to me during class soon, so I can help you and we can figure out ways about contacting people, and maybe we can contact a few people and see what kind of response we get. Okay, because getting people that add value, that add um, credibility and reliability. So that's why I said specifically, I did say a university lecturer, a PhD student. These are people who we consider reliable in the academic field because they are in their position for a reason. They are seen as a reliable source of information for the topics they teach. Okay, so and going back to step 2. So once you've thought about all this stuff, your survey questions should not be the same as interview questions. Okay, this has happened to me quite a bit. You need to, if you're planning a survey, you're planning that to a particular target audience. If you're planning a interview, you are planning that to a particular person. Yes, you can have some similar questions, absolutely, but I would expect you to be catering to your target audience. So if you're doing a survey and you're trying to get as many respondents from, let's say, an online gaming community, they should be very different in the way they are worded compared to if you were interviewing a person who actually creates games or is involved in the gaming industry one way or another. Okay, they are two different people or two different target audiences, and interviews should be tailored to the person you are interviewing. So they should have stuff in there. Okay, going, okay, so I found this person online. I want to interview them. I'm going to ask them if they can be interviewed. That means you need to do some research about this person. You need to know about them before you interview them. And you might want to get some general stuff off them. Absolutely. Like, okay, so what do you teach? And you definitely, one of the things we will get to when we start looking at this is you need, and getting into research ethics is you need to be asking permission from these people to use this information that you're collecting in your research. Okay, that is part of consent and it is incredibly important. And we will get around to that another time. So if you're wanting a percentage, for example, so this is just an example I've come up with. So I want to know the percentage of respondents who do or do not agree with medical cannabis being legalized in South Australia. So medical cannabis is currently legal in, or medicinal cannabis, sorry, I should say, is legal in Victoria currently. So knowing this, knowing I want to know that, I've gone, here is the question. So medicinal cannabis should be legalized in South Australia. Agree or disagree? Simple, straightforward. Okay. If you're wanting to get someone's opinion on it, you could do this and then go in a separate question. And again, we really want one question. So we want one answer per question. So if you want to know if they agree or disagree, and then you want to know why, the why bit needs to be a separate question. So my second question following this up would be, why, can you please explain your answer, or why do you agree or disagree? And then the people can input their anecdotal or their personal experience or their personal opinion. Okay, so then right there I've got something I can create a percentage of, and then with the second one, that is something I can potentially quote, give it depending on the type of information supplied. Okay, now last slide. So for the last slide, we're just doing 7 tips for writing a great survey. Again, it doesn't matter that I've written survey here. This is just something to keep in mind, even when you're just writing questions for interviews and whatever as well. Okay, focus groups as well. So you want to, if you wanting to get that quantitative data, so the numbers, you're focusing on asking close-ended questions. You don't want them to necessarily elaborate. You're wanting a yes, no, maybe. You're wanting, you know, uh, multiple choice type of events. Okay. Keep your survey questions neutral. Now, what this is actually really, really important for those of you who are looking at doing something that can be seen as a little political, or maybe you're breaching into things that potentially will make someone uncomfortable. What I say neutral is they need to not have your opinion on them. By influencing with, if you're trying to, if you're trying to write a question and you want to know if people are, okay, we'll use a highly political one that's actually got a lot of religious text as well. If we go back to a couple of years where same-sex marriage was legalized, so that was in 2016. This was a huge debate around the country, right? So if I was, so just say I was pro-gay marriage and I wanted to ask, the people in my school community if they were pro-gay marriage or not. I would need to make sure that despite my personal feelings on the subject, when I was asking questions, my personal experience and my personal points of view were not expressed in those questions. Okay, that is good research. You need to remove yourself from your questions and your topic in order to obtain um, unbiased and truthful. Well, the responses might be biased, but that is their right as your respondents. Your questions need to be unbiased. You need to be neutral in the way you ask them. Even if you're doing an interview, you shouldn't be trying to argue necessarily a point with anyone. That is not the type of research questions we're asking. I know if you watch a lot of interviews, say if you look at like Oprah, or if you look at any of those other ones that are done by, I suppose, channel, 60 Minutes, I think it's channel 7. Um, when they're asking a lot of interviews, they do purposely ask a lot of emotive questions because that gets them views. We're not doing that. We're wanting to obtain information to use in a research paper or a research task, essentially. Okay, so keep that in mind. Keep a balanced set of answer choices, meaning that's providing choice in the way they answer. So you do want some of those yes, no. You do want some multiple choice, and you do most certainly want to supply the people a chance to give their opinion or give their experience or whatever it is you're asking from them. Okay, so that's three really good ones. Number four, don't ask two things at once. This gets back to the point I was saying before. If you're wanting something to make a statistic, and so for the example, I'll just go back one. So in this one, I did medicinal cannabis should be legalized in South Australia, which is a statement. Agree, disagree, and then I want to know why. Why, as I said, why would be a separate question. Okay, so I've asked one thing per question. Keep your questions different from each other. This is why it's really important to get it drafted, because you may not realize that you're essentially asking the same question but using different words or different terminology. Okay, this is why it's important. So you want to keep, you want to plan your questions and you really want to get them drafted, and we want to make sure that you are getting the answers and the responses that you need in order to add that value and not waste your respondents' time. Let most of your questions be optional to answer. Now, this is especially for those people who are looking at, as I said, doing something that's a little bit more on the extreme side, where you're looking at politics or religion or anything like that. The reason being is for some people, it might be too confronting. It might be that they just, it might be that they don't have an opinion and then they don't care. That's not for us to judge. So it's one of those things where you go, yeah, it could be agree, disagree, or it could be, so you could say prefer not to say, or you could say, or not, maybe you'd have a box there called no answer or whatever it is you want to talk, what you want to say. Okay, tip and last tip for this one is do a test drive. So when you have finished and we've drafted it, I've said do it like a staff member, so someone who hasn't potentially drafted your work. You want someone to look at it and answer the questions for you and see what kind of responses you get back from them. This is again getting back to getting more feedback to know how we can improve the answer of those questions. So anyone that you ask ideally would be in your target audience. And I have realized that I've talked about target audience a lot, but I have not actually included that in my slide. I will update my slide. So when I present this in class, it does have a thing in there. But yeah, so it's really important. So when you go to start writing your question, and that's all I've actually got on my slides, I just want to go right back. When we get to step one, it's actually thinking about who you're going to ask. It should automatically be determined by your topic. Okay, your topic will automatically almost subdivide people for you into groups of I could potentially ask them, I could definitely ask them. If there is no one that you are personally aware of that you could interview or do a survey with, then that's when you really need to come speak to a teacher, so we can help you in either locating someone or giving you ideas on where we could find someone. Okay, so step one really should have figure out your target audience, then brainstorm your answers, because you really need to know your target audience to be able to successfully write your questions. So I will update this slide and delete the one that's already on DayMap. But as far as that's it, so I'll just rehash. So target audience, you're going to backwards think your question. So you're going to go, okay, this is the answer I want. This is the information I need it to be useful. Okay, this is how I'm going to do it. These are the types of information I'm going for, followed by I'm going to now draft some of my questions and get them written up. and get them written up, get them drafted by a teacher, and then do a test run. Okay, remembering that the question sets for each type of instrument need to be different. Some can be similar, but they should be different. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Thanks for watching as per usual, and I'll come back with another video shortly. Look forward to seeing you in class. Thank you.